All right, welcome back, guys. So in previous episodes, we've been talking about great resets of the past. We talked about how the 1893 World's Fair seemed like an exposition of old world technology before the ruling class did away with it. I'm going to read this to you. This was from 1894. Excuse me. This is from 1894. The title is Industrial Tyranny, an Attack on Corporate Conspiracy. From Henry Demarest Lloyd, Wealth Against Commonwealth. Now, keep in mind what's going on today. Keep in mind this is 1 year after the World's Fair of 1893. Some other things. This is a time of the Industrial Revolution. This is Reconstruction after the Civil War. Very tumultuous time, and we'll take little breaks to talk about that. Let's begin. The Industrial Revolution of the late 19th century was a cause of wonder and alarm to Americans. The emerging technology and business organization of the industrial era seemed to generate miraculous powers for creating goods and services out of the natural riches of the continent. Yet in the midst of economic progress, a strange new world confronted the American people. Whole industries were dominated by one or a few giant corporations, whose resources exceeded those of many states. The consolidation of a large part of the nation's railroads into half a dozen major systems subjected the commerce of the nation to the will of the masters of capital. The corporation and the supercorporation, parentheses, the trust and the holding company, increasingly displaced the traditional figure of the responsible owner-manager of business enterprises. Wall Street, the mysterious haunt of bulls and bears, decided fundamental policies for the national economy. Broadly, the mastery of the nation seemed to pass from the people and their political leaders to the imperious captains of industry and finance. Liberty produces wealth, wrote the social critic Henry Demarest Lloyd, and wealth destroys liberty. Our bignesses, cities, factories, monopolies, fortunes, which are our empires, are the obesities of an age gluttonous beyond its power of digestion. Our size has got beyond both our science and our conscience. So what came to my mind is the technocracy we're living through today, where we have 3 or 4 major social media platforms controlling the dissemination and spreading of all information. And notice this is no different than when all of the railroad companies were combined into a half a dozen major systems, right? Power and wealth become concentrated in a very small group, and they tell us this small group is just more intelligent, more skillful than the rest of the people. Let's continue. In his radical attack on the new tyranny of wealth, Henry Lloyd did not speak for the generality of Americans, or even of reformers. The public, he complained, was too ready to accept the values of the empire builders, and the reformers were too easily satisfied with superficial remedies. Wow, how about that? Oh my goodness. So yeah, we have a population today that is just willing to accept whatever falsehoods are put in front of their face via social media. They don't need evidence. You know, this whole pandemic nonsense, nobody cares about the reality of it. They just take the information they're given and they run with it, right? And that leads into what it says here. The people are satisfied with superficial remedies. You know what I mean? So even though we're heading into a new world order and we're heading into the tribulation, if a politician says one thing people like, they tend to forget about everything else. It's classic Hegelian dialectic, right? The guy that comes to mind would be Abbott, governor of Texas, and DeSantis, the governor of Florida. Instead of telling the truth about the shots going in people's arms, they sit up there and they brag about how many old people they got to take it, right? But at the same time, they say, oh, it's a choice. So nothing changed. Let's continue. He found a contradiction between the interdependent nature of modern industrial society, in which, quote, everyone is living at the mercy of everyone else in a way entirely peculiar to our times, end quote, and the modern system of industrial control, in which a few monopolistic combinations rule society for their own selfish ends of profit and power. The solution lay in a vaguely conceived cooperative commonwealth ruled by the masses of producers according to the principle of social interest. Quote, "There is to be a people in industry, as in government," end quote, as a first power or public property. As a first step in this direction, Lloyd demanded that there must be no private use of public power or public property. That is to say, public utilities such as railroads should be publicly owned and operated. In the following selection, his specific analysis of the Standard Oil Company and its use of the smokeless rebate as a device for destroying competition was presented as a case study of the false morality of the times, which encourages men to do each other to death, provided only the weapon be a bargain and the arena a market. Henry Lloyd was a journalist who resigned his post on the editorial staff of the Chicago Tribune in 1885 to devote full time to reform causes. Beginning in the 1880s, his articles and books on the evil of trust and on labor problems won him a wide reputation as a social critic of the new industrial regime. Wealth Against Commonwealth, 1894, published when Lloyd was making an unsuccessful bid for Congress on the populist ticket, is his most effective work. No doubt the ravages of a major depression following the Panic of 1893 gave added force to the message of the book among contemporary readers. Now, how interesting is that? We go from the greatest World's Fair ever, one of the greatest and most amazing events to ever happen, and then it turns into the Panic of 1893. So this is looking like Great Reset material, right? Build it up to break it down, ordo ad cal, right? Lloyd broke with the populace in 96 over the question of supporting Bryan and concentrating on the silver issue. He spent the subsequent years, 1897 to 1901, in travel abroad observing such social experiments as compulsory labor arbitration. At the end of his life, he joined the New Socialist Party. Definitely not advocating that. Let's hear what he says, though. With searching intelligence, indomitable will, and a conscience which makes religion, patriotism, and the domestic virtues but subordinate paragraphs in a ritual of money worship, the mercantile mind flies its airline to business supremacy. That entirely modern social arrangement, the private ownership of public highways, has introduced a new weapon into business warfare, which means universal dominion to him who will use it with an iron hand. The weapon is the rebate, smokeless, noiseless, invisible, of extraordinary range, and the deadliest gun known to commercial warfare. It is not a lawful weapon, like the explosive bullet. It is not recognized by the laws of war. It has to be used secretly. The apparatus of the rebate is so simple that it looks less like a destroying angel than any weapon of offense ever known. The whole battery consists only of a pen and ink and some paper. The discharge is but the making of an entry, but the signing of a check. But when the man who commands this simple enginery directs it against a business competitor, you can follow the track of wreckage like the path of a cyclone, by the ruins which lie bleaching in the air for years. The gentlemen who employ it give no evidence of being otherwise engaged than in their ordinary pursuits. They go about, sedate and smiling, with seemingly friendly hands empty of all tools of death, but all about them as they will, as if it were only by wish of theirs, which attendant spirits hasten to execute. Rivals are blown out of the highways. Busy mills and refineries turn to dust. Hearts break, and strong men go mad or commit suicide or surrender their persons and their property to the skillful artillerist. Wow. So what happened last year? Last year we had a global issue come up, and we were put into these lockdowns where small businesses were forced to shut their doors. And if they were not forced to shut their doors, rules were put in place to limit the amount of product they could sell, right? Supply chains got tight. Everything came to a grinding halt, except the major box stores, Walmarts, Walgreens, CVS. You see, all of these institutions remained open, and they also remained stocked, unlike the small businesses, right? So it's very obvious that behind the scenes with pen, ink, and paper, there was an agenda. There is an agenda to shut down small, independently owned business. And if that wasn't bad enough, we just had the president come out and mandate that any company with over 100 employees must get everybody you know what. So they're just coming after small businesses, right? More than any others, the wrongs of the oil industry provoked the investigations by Congress from 1872 to 87 and caused the establishment of the Interstate Commerce Commission. And more than any others, they have claimed the attention of the new law in the new court. The cases brought before it cover the oil business on practically every road of any importance in the United States. In New England, in the Middle States, the West, the South, the Pacific Coast, on the Great East and West Trunk Roads, the Pennsylvania, the Erie, the Baltimore, and Ohio, the New York Central and all their allied lines, on the transcontinental lines, the Union Pacific, the Central Pacific, the Southern Pacific, on the Steamship and Railroad Association, controlling the South and Southwest. They show that from ocean to ocean and from Gulf to St. Lawrence to the Gulf of Mexico, wherever the American citizen seeks an opening in this industry, he finds it, like the deer forest and grouse moors of the old country, protected by gamekeepers against him and the common herd. So, in the 1890s, we clearly had a reset, right? We had the World's Fair, then we had a depression, same year, right after, where small businesses, once again, were destroyed. And we have these people like Rockefeller and all the robber barons doing backdoor deals to destroy small businesses, right? So that's what we're living through today. We have the issue, right? The pandemic, and that's being used to write off the small business, being used to consolidate power. It's really not any different than what happened 100 years ago, 120 years ago. The terms in which the Commission have described the preferences given the oil combination are not ambiguous. Great difference in rates, unjust discrimination, intentional disregard of rights, unexcused, a vast discrepancy, enormous, illegal, excessive, extraordinary, forbidden by the Act to regulate commerce, so obvious and palpable a discrimination that no discussion of it is necessary. Wholly indefensible, patent and provoking discriminations for which no rational excuse is suggested. Obnoxious, disparity, absurd and inexcusable. Gross disproportions and inequalities. Long practiced, the most unjust and injurious discrimination, and this discrimination inured mostly to the benefit of one powerful combination. That perfectly describes what's going on today. This was what the Interstate Commerce Commission found all along the record from 87 to 93. When one of those who got the benefits so characterized was before the New York legislature in 88, he said, "I know of no discrimination in the oil traffic of any kind since the passage of the Interstate Commerce Act. The smokeless rebate makes the secret of success in business to be not manufacture, but manufactor, breaking down with a strong hand the true makers of things. To those who can get the rebate, it makes no difference who does the digging, building, mining, making, producing, the million forms of the wealth they covet for themselves." Wow, that's basically like your Amazons today, or your Walmarts today, right? They care not at all about the worker. They care not at all about the product. It is simply all about what happens behind the scenes, the smokeless rebate, consolidating, combining power to take out the little guy, breaking down the small business. They need only to get control of the roads. All that they want of the wealth of others can be switched off the highways into their hands. To succeed, ambitious men must make themselves refiners of freight rates, distillers of discriminations, owners, not of lands, mines, and forests, not in the first place, at least, but of the railway officials through whose hands the produce must go to market. Combine that to the jab, right? They don't need to control every doctor. And I think this is what we're seeing. They just need to control the hospital, right? The people who set the policies, the people who are never seen, never talked to, we don't know their names or their faces, but they're forcing entire medical complexes to go along with this, right? Terrible. Let's see. Builders, not of manufactories, but of privileges. Inventors only of schemes, to keep for themselves the middle of the road and both sides of it. Wow. Talk about what's going on today. The invention of schemes and the controlling of both sides of it, right? This is how they work together. Whether it's DeSantis and Abbott working against Gavin Newsom and the other liberals, they're all on the same team. They've created the conflict so that they can control both sides of it, and this is called the Hegelian dialectic, right? But of ways to tax the property of their competitors into their pockets, they need not make money. They can take it from those who have made it. Public opinion, as yet only in the gristle in these new questions, turns upon first one and then another as the author of its troubles. The Soulless Corporation, the combination of corporations, railroad oppression, or whatnot, but the corporation is merely a cover. The combination of corporations, an advantage. The private ownership of public highways, an opportunity. In the rebate, its perfect tool. The real actors are men, the real instrument, the control of their fellows by wealth, and the mainspring of the evil is the morals and economics which cipher that brothers produce wealth when they are only cheating each other out of birthrights. So, little background, the Civil War destroyed half of the country, and the North had military control for decades of the southern and western states, right? So it's during this time we see a mass migration from the south to the north. And what happens is all of these factories are built and they're filled up with disenfranchised people. Black, white, women, men, just disenfranchised people. And really what was going on was the ushering in of a new slavery, the modern slavery, the slavery that you and I are in right now. Yes, we are slaves, 100%. And they did that through their corporations, right? We have the railroad robber barons, steel, oil, Rockefeller, Carnegie, Vanderbilt, Astor, it goes on. And all these things happen right after the Civil War. So what do you think the war was really about? Yeah. The success of the same men in Europe shows that railroad discrimination is not the essence of their power, though it has in America been the chief instrument. By their wealth and their willingness to use it in their way, they have become supreme. Supreme even where, as in England and Germany, they had no such unjust and crushing preference on the highways as in America. Back of highway privilege, back of money power, back of trade supremacy, gained by these two means must be reckoned. As the essence of this phenomenon, the morality, our morality, which not only allows but encourages men to do each other to death, provided only the weapon be a bargain and the arena a market. Everything shall not go to market, says Emerson, but everything does go to market. The millionaire is the modern hero, says the New York Evening Post. The men who have found in the rebate the secret of business success, and there are more of them than the public guesses, have only extended a fiercer hand to the results all we're aiming at. They have used the smokeless rebate because it was the best gun. But if that had not been ready to their hand, they would have taken the next best. The course of conquest might have been slower, but unless checked by moral interventions, it would have reached the same end. If society is founded on the idea that property belongs to the strongest, these will sooner or later get all the property by bargains or by battles according to the spirit of the age. The highest state and national courts and the Interstate Commerce Commission of the United States have sustained the people in the assertion of their rights, under the law, to come and go with free and equal rights on the highways. The judges have solemnly warned the guilty men that they must give up their abhorrent attempt to drive citizens out of the industries of their choice, and to add the property of the people to their vast estates. Although thus declared in the right by the highest judges of the law, in the fact the people are poor, defeated, and unsuccessful. Though thus warned by the authoritative voice of the ministers of right and justice that their purposes and practices are iniquitous and intolerable, the men who have determined that whole provinces of American industry shall be theirs, and theirs only, continue their warfare of extermination upon poor men, with methods practically unchanged. Yeah, how's that for 2020 vision? The methods haven't changed at all. Continuing. They evade or defy the laws of the states and of the nation, and the decisions of the courts, state and national. Guided by the advice of the skillfulest lawyers, they persist in open violation or make such changes in their procedure as will nullify statute and decision without danger to them. For 30 years, the independents in the oil region have had this reinforcement of the law. And for 30 years, in spite of it, their rights have been defiantly, continuously violated to the common ruin. See, that's what's going on today. We're allegedly protected by things like the Bill of Rights and state government. You know what I mean? They tell us, they'll go up on stage, the Abbotts and DeSantis's, and tell us that we will never lose our rights, that nobody can force us to do anything. Meanwhile, it just gets worse and worse, right? And that's how satanic, evil organizations work. And they control our government. Absolutely. They're going to put us in camps and at the same time tell us we're free. And most people will believe it. The people spend their lives passing about from field or factory, or shop or office, to market from market, to court from court, to legislature from legislature, to printing office. They are the type of the time, disturbed by the demand of the new tyranny of wealth, for tribute from their daily labors, and forbidden to rest until out of their suffering a new liberty has been won, the industrial liberty, for which political and religious liberty wait for their full realization. Pretty amazing. There's a lot of good stuff in this book. We've read Charles Francis Adams' writing in this. It's from the 1860s, where he warns about the danger of the corporation. And once again, hindsight, this was written in 1894, and everything Charles Francis Adams said was right. Basically, he said this invention called the corporation is not what people thought it was. It is not just a business, right? The corporate body is, in fact, what we are. That's what our social security numbers are, right? We are incorporated. We have a body corporate. There's a straw man made. When you're born, you get your birth certificate and your social security number, an invisible entity of you is made. You have your real self, and then you have your straw man. That straw man ties into the fiat currency of the Federal Reserve. So in order for our government to get loans from the Federal Reserve, there needs to be collateral. And our straw men, in fact, are the collateral. So literally, us and the work we do is the collateral for the Federal Reserve, which gives all the money to the government, never to be seen by us, right? And everything in this article we just read is happening again today, because it's always happening. This is a result of losing the Civil War, right? In 1871, they incorporated Washington, D.C., which set all of this in motion. And it's just a shame. So I hope you guys can get a little wisdom from this. And if I can tell you anything, is don't trust anything on television. Don't trust anything on social media. All you can trust is God and the people in front of you, physically. No more following left and right wing YouTube people. You know the deal. I mean, a couple years ago, I thought Trump was the man. You know what I mean? I thought he was great. And then, I started getting a little suspicious. I used to watch, Turning Point and Young Americans for Freedom. I just can't anymore. I can't, because none of these groups are talking about the truth. None of them are talking about the genocide we're going into right now. And I mean that literally. The genocide we're going into right now. Seek God, seek Jesus, and just be there for your family and your community. I think it's about time we stop paying attention to these evil people, start getting ready for our own America. God bless.